I'm gonna make some videos of some books that I bought that are pretty good. This one is Actively Unwoke, The Ultimate Guide for Fighting Back Against the Woke Insanity in Your Life by Carolyn Borisenko. She has a YouTube channel on here. Yeah, YouTube channel on YouTube. There are a couple of them. It's pretty good. It just goes over this stuff. The woke have taken over every major institution in this country, the schools and the universities, corporate America, the media, and the government. It's time to fight back. Actively Unwoke will show you how. It's pretty good. And the idea I was getting of it, like, that I got from it so far, because I haven't read all of it, is that basically how woke people are in and of themselves white supremacists, because they redefine white supremacy in a way that makes it harder to solve the problem, but also in a way that they may benefit from it. In a way that they may benefit from it. And also, like, you know what I mean? Like, because if you're going to redefine it, you're not going to be able to solve the problem. And it's also proof that you don't want to solve the problem. You just want to benefit from it. And they do it by weaponizing it. Yeah, they benefit from, weaponizing it against their opponents and then using it to gain political, institutional power, control, and influence. And so they actually benefit from white supremacy. That's why I said they're in the way of white supremacists. That's in their own way. Because if they were trying to solve the problem of such a racism, like racism in general, right, then they wouldn't be using it as a weapon and benefiting from it, because that's not being a solution to the problem, that's being part of the problem. And therefore you're committing to the problem and you're benefiting from it. That's why I call them the woke joke, or the joke woke, or whatever, because they are a joke. I don't take them seriously, because they're not honest about what they believe. They're just liars and deceivers. That's why I buy these books, to destroy their ideology or whatever. Another one I just got is this one. It's pretty good. I just read it, to be honest. It's kind of technical, but I did finish it. Yeah, I finished it, and I like how he goes over the disagreements on religious liberty, between Washington, Madison, and Jefferson. Like, the idea that I was getting was that like Washington was more of like an ecumenist, right? Like, he wanted something that is like common ground, because he wanted religion involved to a certain extent with government, and in order to reach and benefit the civic end for the civil order, basically. So it's not just for the religious cause in itself, but it's for the benefit of the republic, right? And then Jefferson, like, he was more like a liberal reformer. Like, he says that opinions don't harm him, right? Civically speaking, I guess. But then he also says how he engaged in theology, like when is in University of Virginia. How he also kind of tried to silence religious opinion, right? That he believed what it calls sectarianism or something, or some kind of, I don't know, some kind of like fundamentalism or something like that. Like he did see like there are some religious opinions that are harmful, basically. And then there's Madison, who was like basically non-cognizant. Yeah, so basically that because the national government has no say in religion or God, right? Because it's not part of the national. I mean, it's not part of government. It's part of the what's it called? The American Social Compact. So the rights come from God, not from government or church, right? And so basically, yeah, the book is called Religious Liberty and the American Founding, Natural Rights and the Original Meanings of the First Amendment, Religious Clauses, by Vincent Philip Munoz. So I did enjoy it, kind of give it an interpretation on the amendment, on the First Amendment, right? Religious clauses, it presupposes what he calls a social compact, natural natural rights construction of the First Amendment. Like here he says, the argument. In this book, I attempt to demonstrate the following. The founding era, 1776 through 91, state declarations of rights and constitutions, as well as the founders' philosophical and theological political writings, reveal that the founders' most authoritative understanding of religious liberty is that it is an inalienable natural right. The First Amendment's framers left the original meanings of the First Amendment's religious clauses undetermined. We can know something about the text's original meanings, but there is no clear, unambiguous original public meaning of what constitutes an, quote, establishment, end quote, of religion, or the, quote, free exercise, end quote, thereof. To construe the text accordingly, we must go beyond the text. An originalist construction of the religion clauses consistent with the First Amendment's text and the founders' most authoritative understanding would be based on the founders' conception of religious liberty as an inalienable natural right. For the free exercise clause, an inalienable natural rights construction would prohibit Congress and the states, assuming incorporation, from making laws that exercise jurisdiction over religious exercises as such. Thus constructed, the free exercise clause would prohibit state actions that punish, prohibit, mandate, or regulate religious beliefs or exercises as such. For the establishment clause, an inalienable natural rights construction would prohibit Congress and the states, assuming incorporation, from exercising the functions of a church and from delegating government's coercive authority to churches, especially in matters of taxation and financial contributions. And so here he says, corresponding contributions I hope this book makes include elucidating the founders' inalienable natural rights political philosophy and explaining why an approach to religious liberty jurisprudence based on it captures the founders' most authoritative understanding, explaining what we can know and what we likely cannot know about the original meaning of the First Amendment's religious clauses, thereby clarifying why we have to go beyond the First Amendment's text to elaborate its meanings, presenting a natural rights construction of the religious clauses based on the founders' political philosophy of inalienable natural rights. And so he goes over many examples. He applies the logic to certain court cases that happen, like how it would be interpreted under this understanding of the social compact, natural rights construction, right, of the First Amendment, religious clauses. So I thought it was very interesting. I just got this one. It's called Law in the Bible, Justice, Mercy, and Legal Institutions. This is edited by Robert F. Cochran Jr. and David Van Duren. And so, I haven't read it yet. It says in the back, yet too often Christians either pick and choose verses out of context to bolster existing positions or assume that any legal judgment the Bible expresses should become the law of the land. Law in the Bible asks, what inspired light does the Bible shed on Christians' participation in contemporary legal systems? It says each chapter is co-written by a legal scholar and a theologian and focuses on a key aspect of the biblical witness concerning civil or positive law, that is, law that human societies create to order their communities, implementing and enforcing it through civil government. A foundational text for legal professionals, law and pre-law students, and all who want to think in a faithfully Christian way about law and their relationship to it. So I thought it was interesting, so I bought it. This one's Created Equal, How the Bible Broke with Ancient Political Thought. I'll show you the other ones. Yeah, this one. And this one. So yeah. Then, this is by Joshua A. Berman. It basically goes over what it says. This is Joshua Berman has written a superb scholarly and paradigm-shifting work of the Hebrew Bible. As perhaps the first attempt to create a truly egalitarian society, I can think of no better way of renewing our encounter with the biblical text, and I recommended highly. That's from Sir Jonathan Sacks, Chief Rabbi of the United Hebrew Congregations of the Commonwealth. And so I thought it was interesting, so yeah, kind of wanted to see what that was about. This was about like rights, right? Because it ties into natural rights and stuff. It's called Rethinking Rights, Historical, Political, and Philosophical Perspective. This is Bruce P. Fronan and Kenneth L. Grasso. This is as reports of genocide, terrorism, and political violence fill today's newscast. More attention has been given to issues of human rights, but all too often the sound bites seem overly simplistic. Many Westerners presume that non-Western peoples yearn for democratic rights, while liberal values of toleration give way to xenophobia. This book shows that the identification of rights with contemporary liberal democracy is inaccurate and questions the assumptions of many politicians and scholars that rights are self-evident in all circumstances and will overcome any conflicts of thought or interest. Rethinking Rights offers a radical reconsideration of the origins, nature, and role of rights in public life, interweaving perspectives of leading scholars in history and political science, philosophy, and law to emphasize rights as a natural outgrowth of a social understanding of human nature and dignity. So I thought it looked interesting, so I went ahead and got that one, and then this one, like it says the dark side of church and state, separation. It says the French Revolution, Nazi Germany, and International Communism by Stefan Struggle. If I said that correctly. It looked pretty interesting and good because I don't see secularism as like. I think I mentioned this book in another video. I'm not sure, but I thought I'd bring it up in this one just in case. Anyway, this one is this is America, God's Plantation by J. Sabatino. That's what it looks like. The back says plantation, a settlement in a new country or region. From Merriam-Webster. 10 years after those of the Mayflower colony started. I'm sorry, I'm kind of dry. I ran a lot, so my mouth's dry. This is 10 years after those on the Mayflower started. Plymouth Plantation. John Winthrop, aboard the Arbella to Massachusetts, delivered these words to those on board in a sermon known as, quote, a model of Christian charity, unquote. Quote, the Lord will be our God and delight to dwell among us. When he shall make us a praise and glory, that men shall say of seceding plantations, may the Lord make it like that of New England. For me, we must consider that we shall be a city upon a hill, the eyes of all people are upon us, end quote. This is 140 years later. The, quote, shot heard around the world, end quote, was fired in Massachusetts, and thus beginning America's independence. And America was always intended to be God's planting. This book outlines how America began, how we have departed from that vision, and how we can regain it if we want to, quote, pursue our happiness, end quote, and restore our hope to future generations. That was an interesting book, so I got it, and I like those books, that deal with that, like what I call the New Covenant paradigm, or ethos, right, of the New Covenant. This one's Republicanism, Religion, and the Soul of America by L.S. Sandus. Just says in the back some, I just read briefly from it. It says, as debates rage over the place of faith in our national life, Tocqueville's 19th century crediting of religion for shaping America is largely overlooked today. Now in Republicanism, Religion, and the Soul of America, L.S. Sandus praises the rise of Republican government from key sources in Protestant civilization, paying particular attention to the influence of the Bible on the founders and the blossoming of the American mind in the 18th century. And it just goes over and talk about Declaration of Independence and To establish a unifying theoretical perspective for his studies, Munoz considers the philosophical underpinnings of religion and the contribution that Eric Vogelin made to our understanding of religious experience. And so I guess it's based on, this is here based on like Vogelin's thought. He contributes fresh studies of the character of Vogelin's thought, its relationship to Christianity, his debate with Leo Strauss over reason, revelation, and the meaning of philosophy, and the theory of Gnosticism as basic to radical modernity. So, another interesting book that I got. This one is Same-Sex Marriage and Religious Liberty, Emerging Conflicts. It's edited by Douglas Laycock, Anthony R. Piccarello Jr., and Robin Fretwell Wilson. This is a collection of essays that go over this topic, religious liberty, between religious liberty and same-sex marriage. This one, I haven't read it yet, but it looked interesting, so I got it. So it's called Religion and the Demise of Liberal Rationalism, the Foundational Crisis of the Separation of Church and State by J. Jed Owen. So like that. It says at the same time that satisfaction with the shape of church-state relations is on the rise, liberalism is witnessing ever-spreading postmodern skepticism regarding the theoretical soundness of its core principles. What do these two trends have to do with each other? Potentially a great deal, according to J. Judd Owen, who contends that the liberal posture to religion cannot be divorced from, but rather lies at the deepest level of the serious questions confronting liberalism's original rational basis. It says it does a careful critique of Richard Rotary, John Rawls, and Stanley Fish. He argues that today, quote, post-rational can only evade or obscure, but cannot resolve liberalism's perennial difficulty with religion. Yet by politically fostering an indifference to the question of religious truth, liberal rationalism itself shares blame for its present crisis. Anti-foundationalism is thus not a radical alternative to liberal rationalism, but its unintended byproduct. Presenting an original map of the current landscape of political thought, Owen's provocative book cuts across political science, philosophy, religion, and constitutional theory. So, I need to read this one. Just have so many. It's hard to pick which one I want to read. Like this one I was reading briefly. It's kind of technical. It's called A Critique of Anti-Racism in Rhetoric and Composition, The Semblance of Empowerment by Eric Smith. It's a very basic cover. The back is basically what it's about. It says A Critique of Anti-Racism in Rhetoric and Composition, The Semblance of Empowerment, examines current anti-racist ideology in rhetoric and composition, arguing that it inadvertently promotes disempowerment for both students and scholars. Eric Smith claims that empowerment theory, which promotes individual and communal efficacy, is missing from most anti-racist initiatives that instead often abide by what Smith calls a, quote, primacy of identity, end quote, an over-reliance on identity bolstered by narratives of victimhood and politics of prefiguration. This mode of anti-racism promotes a semblance of empowerment over truly empowering theories and practices. Scholars of rhetoric, composition, and communication and race will find this book particularly helpful or useful. Just not really for the layman, to be honest, because I had a little bit of difficulty reading that one. This one is by Thompson. It didn't come with the cover. Basically, the book is In the Hands of a Good Providence. It's by Religion and the Life of George Washington by Mary Thompson. Like Sacred Fire of Liberty. It goes over the, George Washington being like a traditional Christian, not so much an evangelical, because he was not an evangelical. He was like more of a traditional Anglican or something. Like I said, it's like I forgot what it was called. Libertarian, I can't remember. But It says, to Christian institutions he gave the countenance of his example, and no one could express more fully his sense of the providence of God and the dependence of man. End quote. This is a quote. Yeah, it was a quote. It says these same views have recently been expounded by a contemporary member of the clergy who has used his television ministry to spread the word of Washington's, quote, sterling character, Christian heritage, fervent prayers, devotional life, and Christian walk, end quote, and his life as a, quote, a truly devout Christian, end quote. It says, to muddy the waters further, still other sources, as disparate and mainstream as the popular Encyclopedia Britannica, along with the prominent George Washington biographer James Thomas Flexner, indicates that George Washington was a theist rather than a Christian. Theism developed in the late 17th century, growing out of several centuries of discovery in the sciences of, for example, astronomers' contention that the earth revolved around the sun, which challenged the teachings of the church that the earth was the center of the universe, as well as geography. As explorers from Europe traveled through the other parts of the world and brought back news of other cultures with vastly different religious traditions. In an attempt to reconcile these new ideas, theists propounded the notion that knowledge of God is either born into each person or can be found through reason rather than revelation or the teachings of any specific religious group. This system flowed from a strong belief in the human ability to reason, a disenchantment or repugnance with religious teachings based solely on revelation, which it was thought led to dogmatism and intolerance, and an image of God as the rational creator of a logical and ordered universe. So one well-known example of the latter is the idea that the universe was a watch, which God the watchmaker had constructed, set properly, and then walked away from, allowing his creation to take away without divine interference. So it has been suggested that deist thought can be reduced to 5 main propositions. First, that, quote, all men possess the faculty of reason adequate to all the important needs of human life, end quote. Second, quote, that, quote, reason, the image of God in man, can know God and God's will, end quote. Third, that, quote, man's duty is to do God's will, end quote. Fourth, that, quote, man has always had the possibility of knowledge of the good or natural religion, end quote. And last, that, quote, no religion can be higher than natural religion, end quote. The last point, of course, puts the deists at odds with Christian establishment, which said that Christianity is definitely superior to both natural religion and any other religion found in the world. So the Anglo-American church fought back against the deists in the 18th century. This is Puritan cleric and theologian Jonathan Edwards wrote scathingly that they, quote, wholly cast off the Christian religion and are professed infidels. They are not like the heretics, Arians, Socinians, and others who own the scriptures to be the word of God and hold the Christian religion to be the true religion, but only deny these fundamental doctrines of the Christian religion. They deny the whole Christian religion, end quote. And then he went on to say, it says they own the being of God, but deny Christ was the Son of God, and say he was a mere cheat. And so they say all the prophets and apostles were, and they deny the whole scripture. They deny that any of it is the word of God. They deny any revealed religion or any word of God at all, and say that God has given mankind to other light to walk by, but their own reason. And maybe it goes over Washington's beliefs. Like here it says in the catalog to a 1998 exhibition at the Library of Congress on the role of religion in the founding of the United States. He also wrote that it was difficult to fit Washington into a theist category at all. He said that judging from his public conduct, that he was a loyal Episcopalian. If he was a theist, he did not consider his views incompatible with full participation in the church, because for years he served faithfully as a member of his local vestry. And the larger point here is that theism in America, such as it was, did not veer off into anti-clericalism as it did in Europe. It's accommodated itself without exception to existing religious institutions. So it goes over all of the controversies. Is he a theist or is he not? Obviously it does, like, from what I've read, it goes over, favors the position that he was like a traditional Anglican. And this one is In God We Trust, George Washington and the Spiritual Destiny of the United States of America by Michael A. Shea. That's what it looks like. Basically, it's just the same thing. It deals with like Washington, divine providence, right? God. And so I always like the books that deal with that I would say include the providential history, or it's grounded in providential history, basically. This one is The Idea of Natural Rights by Brian Tierney. It goes over all the origins and history of natural rights. This one's James Madison and Religious Liberty by Robert Howey. Just different essays. Like, I read majority of it. It's pretty good. It goes over, like, let me see, let me just look at the contents. As introduction, historical analysis, James Madison and the Founding of the Republic by A. E. Dick Howard. And then selected Madison papers, like his notes on William Burkitt's expository notes, Madison's correspondence with William Bradford, Virginia Declaration of Rights, Virginia Religious Freedom Debate, 1784 through 1786, Defense of the Constitution, and a bunch of other ones. Religion and American History, Church and State in America, John F. Wilson. This is the Judeo-Christian Foundations of the American Political System, Richard B. Morris, Roger Williams, W. K. Jordan, The Despotism of Toleration, Robert S. Halley, Madison and the Virginia Struggle, The Church of England and the Virginia Politics, Robert S. Halley. That's who was writing that essay. And then Marvin K. Singleton writes the essay called Colonial Virginia as the First Amendment Matrix. Goes over Madison's religion, and then the courage to doubt a secular republic, right? Madison, the First Amendment, 19th century reactions, the legacy of Madison, 20th century establishment and free exercise, the challenge of Madison. Basically, that's like the contents of this book. This one's Possibility of Religious Freedom, Early Natural Law and the Abrahamic Faiths by Karen Taliaferro. Let's see. I'm tired. I'm trying to get through these. This one is Common Law and Natural Law in America, From the Puritans to the Legal Realists by Andrew Forsyth. What it looks like. Cambridge Studies in Law and Christianity. I think I showed this one before. The Biblical Roots of American Constitutionalism, From I Am the Lord to We the People, Joseph Livini. This one's kind of technical. Like, I finished that one, but it was a bit technical. This one's Religious Liberty and the Law, Theistic and Non-Theistic Perspectives. This is edited by Angus J. L. Minuk. If I said that correctly, that's what it looks like. Let me see. There's like different essays and stuff. This one's The American Compact, James Madison and the Problem of Founding by Gary Rosen. This was mentioned in one of the books I was reading. I think the one by Munoz, Religious Liberty. So I bought this one. This one is Nature of Rights at the American Founding and Beyond by Barry Allen Shane. It's like that. Just gray cover. Has a bunch of people that basically a bunch of essays on natural rights and stuff. And contributors: Akil Reed Amar, James H. Hudson, Stephen Macedo, Richard Primus, Jack N. Reckove, John Philip Reed, Daniel T. Rogers, A. Greg Rober, Barry Allen Shane, Rogers M. Smith, Leif Winnar, Gordon S. Wood. Just go over different essays dealing with natural rights. Like here, Americans have been claiming and defending rights since long before the nation achieved independence, but few Americans recognize how profoundly the nature of rights has changed over the past 300 years. In The Nature of Rights at the American Founding and Beyond, Barry Allen Shane gathers together essays by some of the leading scholars in American constitutional law and history to examine the nature of rights claims in 19th century America and how they differed, if at all, from today's understanding. Was America at its founding predominantly individualistic or in some important way communal? Similarly, which understanding of rights was of greater centrality? The historical, quote, rights of Englishmen, in quotes, or abstract natural rights? And who enjoyed these rights, however understood? Everyone, or only economically privileged and military responsible male heads of households? I thought it was a pretty interesting book, so I picked that up. I have a lot of books on natural rights now, and this one's James Madison, The Father of Religious Liberty, by Ronnie K. Smith. And just says that more than 200 years later, James Madison's message still rings true. There is no liberty without faith. James Madison was a man of quiet faith who was also intellectually inspired in miraculous ways. Often called the father of the Constitution, Madison believed rights of conscience were gifts of God, and he was thoroughly committed to establishing a nation conceived in liberty. Throughout his life, thousands of seemingly insignificant events and decisions eventually culminated in the formation of one of the most defining traits of this country, the right to religious freedom. For constitutional scholar Ronnie K. Smith discovered how this right became sacred to Madison and how, with a relentlessness born of faith in God and country, he carefully wove this truth into the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Through Madison's inspiring story, come to see for yourself proof of God's hand in the foundation of our nation and the miracles that are still evident in our lives today. So I thought it was a really good book. I haven't read it, like all of it, or portions of it. And this one's from Alan C. Guelzo. It's called Redeeming the Great Emancipator. It's a little short book, it's like small. And then this one's Conquests and Cultures in International History by Thomas Sowell. It's a short book as well, like a small book. And then this book is a culmination of 15 years of research and travels that have taken the author completely around the world twice. Its purpose has been to try to understand the role of cultural differences within nations and between nations, since today and over the centuries of history, in shaping the economic and social fates of peoples and of whole civilizations, focusing on 4 major cultural areas: that of the British, the Africans, including the African diaspora, the Slavs of Eastern Europe, and the indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere. Conquests and Cultures reveals patterns that encompass not only these peoples, but other peoples of others, and helps explain the role of cultural evolution in economic, social, and political development. This one is Race Crazy, BLM 1619 and the Progressive Racism Movement by Charles Love. So it's like, and then this one's by James Lindsay, Race Marxism, Truth About Critical Race Theory and Praxis. It's like that. Just talks about CRT and all that stuff. I think it's a pretty good book. So hopefully you like, or the videos that, I mean the books that I showed, and that it interests you. And that's all I wanted to do, is show off the videos. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm tired. That's why I'm talking about the books. So anyway, if you liked my video, please like and subscribe. Thank you and God bless.